Hello, everyone, and welcome to the paper and presentation workshop for Dr. Johnston's Nutrition 440 class. So this semester, you're going to be writing a paper as well as making a group presentation utilizing some evidence-based research studies that you're going to find. The paper is going to consist of a critique of one research study, although you can use other research studies to support your opinion. And the presentation is going to be using research studies to defend a position on a video that you guys are going to watch. Both the paper and the presentation need to use quantitative research studies. So a quantitative research study is one using numerically measurable outcomes such as blood pressure, vitamin C blood concentration, or body fat percentage. Now, this quantitative studies are different from qualitative studies in that qualitative studies examine outcomes that aren't able to be numerically measured, such as conducting focus groups, giving open-ended opinion surveys, or inquiring about things like emotion or feeling. In these qualitative studies, researchers often look for things like keywords and themes, and they may use direct quotes for participants. So those are some things that can help you kind of differentiate a qualitative study versus a quantitative study. Again, for the purposes of the presentation and the paper, we only want you to use quantitative research studies. So if you're unsure about what evidence-based nutrition is or a scientific journal article is, take a peek at this video. It was discussed in your first lecture class, and these slides are online. So if you need further information, look at this video, but I'll give you a brief summary. A peer-reviewed journal article is something that's been examined by an expert in the field to ensure that the information presented is accurate. So one tip of a way to identify a peer-reviewed article is if you see under article info, there's a little section called article history, and it says received, then revised, then accepted. So there you know that there's some peer-reviewed process going on. Now it's important to note that this doesn't happen, this section doesn't appear in every single journal article, but if you get it from a reputable scientific journal, it will be peer-reviewed. So some categories of quantitative research we want you guys to know about for this project are in this slide. So the first is a cross-sectional research type. So in a cross-sectional research study, you're not manipulating a variable, you're only observing a phenomenon. So in a survey or epidemiological research, these can be single point in time or they can follow a population, but it's important to remember that no interventions are taking place. However, in an experiment like a randomized controlled trial, you are having a manipulation of a variable. So a randomized controlled trial is where at least two groups are randomized to two different levels of treatment. So one group gets one treatment and another group gets a second treatment. You can have multiple groups, but in a basic randomized controlled trial, you just have two groups. In addition, in a randomized controlled trial, you have blinding of investigators and researchers to the treatment. And this occurs so that there's not any conscious or subconscious manipulation of the variables or the participants. So a randomized control trial helps to minimize any confounding variables, and it gives you an objective measure of an outcome. So that's really important to remember. And so you might want to look for a randomized control trial in your studies, but it's not necessary to select a paper that is just a randomized control trial. So again, a cross-sectional study is a description of the events, and an experimental study such as an RCT is an intervention to look for change. So some other types of research articles. We have qualitative research, which we discussed before. It deals with feelings and non-quantifiable elements. Then we have a review. So a review is really helpful. It's a long, detailed discussion of multiple studies, and it summarizes these studies. Then we have a meta-analysis, which goes a little further in depth from a review. It actually uses statistical analysis of these research articles. And finally, a systematic review. It's a summary of the best available research on one topic or question. So these articles can be used to support your main idea, but they cannot be the main article used in your paper or your presentation. It must be an experimental study. So why is this type of research important? So here's this quote. This is a great quote. Perhaps more than any other discipline, nutrition furnishes an unrelenting barrage of media news, which is so true. So here we have an example of two studies. And so we have a cross-sectional data examining coffee consumption and cardiovascular disease risk. And so this cross-sectional study looked at or found an association with coffee consumption and a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. But an experimental trial showed that coffee ingestion caused an increased risk. So I want you guys to think about what the difference is between these two trials. And which of these studies are more controlled? And are there any other factors at play here that we don't know about? And which of these studies controls for these unknown factors? So these are some things that you would want to ask about your research studies that you select for this class. So here we have a pictorial illustration of a cross-sectional research. So what can be the problem with generalizing back to a larger population? Here we see for cross-sectional research, we take a small sample of the population and say, okay, these results apply to our small sample, so they must apply to the population. So what is the problem with this? What if this smaller population is not representative of the population the author is trying to generalize the results to? This is also something you want to watch out for in the articles you'll be critiquing and a point of interest you'll want to discuss if you select a cross-sectional research study. So here we have a diagram of an experimental research study. All right, so in an experimental research study, we have random assignment. So why is random assignment important? You need to consider this for your paper and consider did the authors randomly assign subjects to their groups, or did they select who went in which group? And what is the problem with hand selecting who went in which group? What if the study designer intentionally or unintentionally weighted one group differently? So this is often the case and what randomization attempts to remedy. Often, instead of random assignment, in case random assignment may be difficult for some reason, investigators will use a technique called matching. And this is where they select two subjects who have very similar characteristics like sex, age, height, weight, or another trait, and they put one of the similar subjects in the experimental group and one in the control group. So this can occur if you don't have access to a large group to conduct the study on, and this helps to control for any differences between the groups before the study even begins. So here we have a little blurb down at the bottom. It's a description of a meta-analysis. So remember, this is like a review, but it's a statistical analysis of multiple research studies results. So here we have 11 randomized controlled trials show that you increase your risk for blood pressure if you consume 5 cups of coffee per day. So I want you guys to think about what is the best method of illustrating the relationship between coffee and cardiovascular disease. Would it be a cross-sectional study? Would it be a randomized controlled trial? Or could it even be a meta-analysis? So one thing you should keep in mind that cross-sectional research cannot prove a theory. So only a properly conducted experiment can demonstrate this causality. So you should be very, very careful when you use the word cause in your paper or your presentation, unless you are absolutely certain that the author established a clear cause and effect relationship between the two variables, which is fairly rare. So better word choices to use are associated with, contributes to, increases risk for, etc. So for this assignment, for the research assignment, each student is going to write one 3-page research paper critique independently of others. So this is an individual assignment. Each student needs to select a quantitative research study, which we already discussed, and it should be from the past 5 years. So exceptions can be approved. Just feel free to email me, Taylor, the TA. And this paper needs to address several of the following points. So you need to start with an introduction. Then you need to discuss the purpose of the study and the hypothesis, which you should include about 2 references in this section. Then you need to discuss the research design, why it was used, and discuss the validity of the method. So did they pick a good research design? Feel free to say no. Just make sure to support your opinion. So next you need to discuss the results using some actual data from your paper. So make sure you use some actual numbers and then say why this data is important. So yes, you may come up with data from a research study, but you need to be able to translate that to how it's significant to the public. And then what's the next step? So what future research needs to be conducted? Sometimes future research is discussed in a journal article, sometimes it's not, so you may need to conclude this on your own. And then finally, you want to end your paper with a summary paragraph to integrate all the concepts that you discussed. So all in all, your paper should have at least 9 references. You can use PubMed to search for references. I'll show that in a later video. This is really important. We don't want any quotes used. In scientific writing, quotes are rarely, if never, used. So do not use quotes. Do not use first person. And make sure to type your paper. So this paper must be exactly 3 full pages, not more or not less. So yes, you may need to edit your paper down or up to meet this 3-page requirement. So you need to make sure that the article that you selected is accessible via PubMed. If not, please email Taylor or Dr. Johnston with a copy. And make sure to submit this paper through SafeAssign. If it's not submitted through SafeAssign, it will not be graded. So that's really, really important. Also, we're providing you with a grading rubric. So check over that grading rubric from your paper. That's the best way to get a good grade on this paper, is to grade yourself before you turn it in. If you are unsure of anything, ask Dr. Johnston or Taylor. I will be happy to look over your paper and make sure you selected a peer-reviewed publication. All of the papers that you write will also be peer-reviewed prior to the final submission. So we're trying to get you to kind of write a scientific paper and go through this standard process. So this critique is a really helpful tool. We want to make sure that you give good constructive criticism on your peer's paper. And we expect to see that every single paper is returned to us with comments on the science, flow, logic, and the grammar. So we don't only want comments on grammar because it's not very helpful. There is no such thing as a perfect paper, so everyone should have something to comment on. So I'm going to accept the papers, randomize them, and give you a de-identified paper, so the person's name is not going to be on it, and you're going to grade it. So make sure to do a thorough job reviewing the paper and give lots of comments on the logic and flow and the science of the paper, not just the grammar. You're going to get 10 points for a thoughtful critique. That's a maximum amount of points. And again, don't worry, these critiques are blinded, so no one will know whose paper, or no one will know who wrote the paper that you have. So here we have the rubric. Go ahead and look over this after this video. You should use this to look over your own paper and to look over your peer's paper. So we want you to use a number system for in-text citations, such as the American Medical Association or the Academy for Nutrition and Dietetics. Websites can be cited, but they're not counted towards the required number of references. And so make sure you don't cite with the URL link, last name, and year, or other format. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to create these citation formats in RefWorks. So if you hate making citations and want to never have to do one again, watch my RefWorks video and I will show you. It will make your life a whole lot easier. All right, so now on to your group presentations. There are going to be 12 groups of about 6 students in the class. Your group assignments are on Blackboard. And this group presentation is 50 points per student. So the way this works is each group presentation is going to be about 20 minutes or 15 slides, and we want 3 slides per student. So in addition to these 3 slides, we're going to have an introductory slide and a reference slide, so you can't count those towards one of your 3 slides. We want you guys to meet and discuss strategies for critiquing information in a video. So you're going to watch a video and you're going to critique it and present information based on the video. Did the video have inaccuracies? Was it a very accurate video? And you're going to support those statements with science. So each group is to critique and expand on the information. You'll need to provide up-to-date information and useful information. You guys will need to discuss what information to present as a group, and you need to use at least 2 quantitative research studies per group to support your opinion. So again, just like the paper, the presentation needs to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So it's up to you guys as to who does what part. So before your presentation and after your presentation, but that same day, you need to complete each survey 2 times. And so these are date sensitive. You have to complete them on the time specified. And this allows Dr. Johnston to know who participated in the project and who did not. So it holds you guys accountable. So make sure you all participate equally in your presentations. You'll be just fine. So this is really, really important. Slides must be sent to the TA, which is me, Taylor, by 5 p.m. the day before the presentation. So your presentation is due 5 p.m. the day before. I'm going to upload these presentations onto the computer to avoid any confusion and to save time before class starts. So no student should take longer than 3 to 4 minutes for their part. We will be timing the presentations and we'll stop you if you go over. So make sure your presentation is not too long. If you go over and we have to stop you, we're not going to grade you on the parts you didn't get to. So make sure to practice. Again, each group member is responsible for the content of the slides they're presenting only. So you're not responsible for your group member's presentation, but the whole presentation needs to be one cohesive working unit. So this is the presentation rubric. We're going to be grading it actively in class. So go ahead and use this to structure your presentation and to assess your presentation before you start. Again, this is the best way to ensure a good grade on the presentation. And finally, if you have any questions at all, please come to my office hour on Tuesdays from 12 to 1 in ABSC 128AB. If you need further clarification or help, I'm happy to do so. You can also email me or email Dr. Johnston. We're happy to help. So I hope this video was helpful. Again, don't forget to watch our next video on RefWorks and PubMed. Thanks, guys.